I remember the sharp, almost clinical smell of new construction, the pristine drywall, the unmarred surfaces of the kitchen island in our dream home, a sprawling modern testament to what I thought was our shared success, perched on a gentle rise with a view of the distant city lights shimmering like scattered diamonds. This house, more than just bricks and mortar, felt like the tangible culmination of a decade of relentless effort in the booming tech industry. My role as a lead developer at a well-established company had consistently brought a comfortable salary, generous bonuses, and the quiet satisfaction of a robust income stream. It was a sense of quiet achievement that hummed beneath the surface of my days, a constant, reassuring current of stability and financial progress, or so I believed, sipping my morning coffee on the cool granite counter. The faint scent of my wife's perfume still lingered in the air from her earlier departure, a soft, floral note that always made me smile, a feeling of deep contentment settling over me as I watched the sun begin its climb, painting the sky in hues of peach and gold. It was a perfect tableau of our seemingly perfect life. Yet even then, a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor of anxiety sometimes rippled through that placid surface. It was a quiet, insidious worry about being house poor, a fear that despite the impressive numbers on paper, the sheer size of the mortgage, the escalating property taxes, the relentless upkeep, and the opulent lifestyle we had built around this grand structure, meant we were always just a few missed paychecks away from feeling the squeeze. This premonition I'd silently push away, dismissing it as the natural caution of someone who had built everything from scratch, a man who still remembered the cramped apartments and instant noodles of his student days. My financial philosophy had always been rooted in prudence, in steady investments in diversified stocks, and a conservative approach to risk management. I'd seen colleagues chase quick gains in the early days of startups that quickly imploded, and I'd always chosen the slower, surer path. But the unease was there, a faint, persistent hum in the background, like a refrigerator's low thrum you only notice when the house is entirely silent. And the silence often felt heavy then, not entirely peaceful. A silence that sometimes amplified the soft rustle of leaves outside or the distant drone of traffic, moments when my mind would drift to the market's volatility, the whispers of an impending bear market in the tech sector, the constant pressure to innovate, to perform, to justify the golden handcuffs that bound me to my desk for 10, 12 hours a day. The gentle weight of our shared future rested squarely on my shoulders, a weight I welcomed, a responsibility I embraced, because it meant providing for my wife, for our future, for the children we hope to have, and for my aging parents. With their slowing steps and increasingly frequent doctor's appointments, they were becoming more dependent, a silent, unspoken expectation that I, the successful son, would be their steady anchor as their own meager savings dwindled and their health wavered. This placed me squarely in the growing ranks of the sandwich generation, a term I'd heard bandied about in hushed tones at company lunches, a reality that added another layer of quiet pressure to the already intricate tapestry of our lives. This pressure somehow seemed to intensify the sheen on everything we owned, making it feel both precious and precarious all at once, a glittering facade hiding a growing internal vulnerability. I often considered the security of insurance policies for long-term care for my parents, but the premiums felt like another weight on our already stretched budget. The first subtle changes began, barely noticeable at first, like a slow shift in the wind, a barely perceptible chill in the air on a summer's day. My wife, always vibrant and outgoing, became a little quieter, a little more withdrawn. Her laughter less spontaneous, more forced around the edges, a faint shadow under her eyes that I attributed to stress, to the general demands of her own demanding career, or perhaps just a bad night's sleep. I'd offer comforting words, a warm embrace, a shared meal out, hoping to lift her spirits, but the weight seemed to cling to her, a persistent, unseen burden. I noticed small things, too, an unexplained charge on a joint credit card statement, quickly dismissed as a minor miscategorization or a forgotten purchase, a hushed phone call she'd quickly end when I walked into the room, her phone screen flipped face down on the nightstand more often, a subtle nervousness in her movements, the way her hand would sometimes tremble slightly as she poured coffee, or the way she'd flinch at a sudden noise. All of it accumulating, tiny fragments of incongruity that didn't quite fit the picture of our well-ordered existence, creating a growing dissonance in the quiet hum of our home, the sort of dissonance that makes a musician subtly uncomfortable without being able to pinpoint the off-key note. A vague sense of unease would occasionally prick at my consciousness, only to be smoothed over by a busy work schedule or the comfortable routine of our evenings, the soft glow of the television, the shared silence of reading side by side, moments that felt like anchors, even as the undercurrent of something unspoken began to subtly tug at their moorings. Then there were the conversations about money, increasingly frequent, increasingly tense. She'd mentioned friends who were investing in next big things, a new decentralized finance protocol, an obscure altcoin, or talking excitedly about early-stage startups and the promise of passive income. These were the kinds of things I, with my traditional tech background and inherent caution, had always viewed with a healthy dose of skepticism, understanding the underlying technology but wary of the speculative bubble and the sheer market risk. I'd offered gentle warnings, rational explanations of risk versus reward, the inherent volatility of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, the almost complete lack of regulation in that nascent space, and the dangers of chasing unsustainable returns. But she'd wave them off with a dismissive hand, a flicker of something in her eyes, a kind of desperate hope, or perhaps a hardened resolve that I couldn't quite decipher. It was a look that conveyed a mixture of excitement and fear, as if she were already on a roller coaster, unable to get off, even as it sped towards a precipice. I, absorbed in my own corporate battles and the weight of my familial responsibilities, perhaps failed to see the warning signs for what they truly were. I mistook them for an ambitious spirit, a desire for financial independence beyond our already comfortable means, a longing for a faster, more exhilarating path to wealth creation. I believe she was simply exploring, dabbling, never imagining the true depth of the treacherous waters she was navigating alone, in secret. A silent, growing chasm was forming between us, unseen and unacknowledged, but felt nonetheless like a subtle shift in the earth beneath our feet, a slow geological process that would eventually lead to a devastating rupture in our carefully constructed reality. The implications of chasing such high-risk investments were lost on me at the time, as I focused on steady growth and maintaining our financial security. The discovery was not a dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no thrown objects. It was far more insidious, a slow, creeping horror that unfurled itself over a cold, ordinary Tuesday morning. The kind of day where the only remarkable thing was the persistent drizzle outside, drumming a monotonous rhythm against the window panes. I was home, having taken a rare personal day to deal with some paperwork for my aging parents' medical bills, a stack of intimidating envelopes that required my full attention, their fragility a constant, quiet worry in my periphery. My parents' shrinking pension and lack of adequate health insurance meant their medical expenses were increasingly falling to me, adding another layer to my budgeting concerns. I'd gone to retrieve a tax document from our shared office, a room we'd designed with dual desks and matching ergonomic chairs, a symbol of our intertwined lives and parallel professional pursuits. And there, tucked beneath a stack of old magazines on her side of the desk, almost as if forgotten in a hurry, lay an envelope, thicker than usual, from a financial institution I didn't immediately recognize. Curiosity, a feeling usually absent from our life of shared transparency, pricked at me, a tiny, insistent needle. I hesitated, my hand hovering, my internal compass spinning. Should I open it? Should I respect her privacy? But the weight of the past few months, the unanswered questions, the subtle shifts pushed me forward, a quiet urgency compelling me. My fingers, usually steady, trembled slightly as I pulled out the contents. A collection of official-looking documents, not bank statements, not credit card bills, but something far more chilling. A series of margin call notices, liquidation statements, and worst of all, a loan agreement for a truly staggering sum. A number that made my breath catch in my throat, a number with so many zeros it felt like a sick joke, a colossal figure that represented not just a bad investment, but a cataclysmic financial failure. It was a sum far, far beyond anything I could have ever imagined us owing, a debt obligation that eclipsed our entire net worth. And as I read, the words blurring through a sudden hot haze of disbelief, the full, devastating scope of her secret began to crystallize. It wasn't just a small, ill-advised flutter in some speculative asset. It was a profound, multi-layered bet, a desperate gamble on a highly volatile cryptocurrency exchange. She had been leveraging almost everything. Our home equity, student loans, she had secretly consolidated and taken out as personal credit lines, even some of our long-term savings and what I thought were secure investments in stocks. It was a desperate attempt to recoup losses that had spiraled out of control in the brutal crypto bear market, a downward spiral I had subtly warned her about, a descent that had wiped out not just her initial investments, but had plunged us deep, irrevocably deep, into an abyss of debt. The papers detailed aggressive trading strategies, a high-stakes pursuit of quick returns through complex derivatives and futures contracts, all fueled by a growing panic. Each subsequent bet was larger than the last, an attempt to cover the mounting losses, a desperate chase to get back to even. It was a secret world she had inhabited, shrouded in silence, while I worked tirelessly, believing we were building a secure financial future. The betrayal hit me first, a visceral punch to the gut. Winded, I sank into her ergonomic chair, the familiar fabric suddenly feeling alien, cold. The drizzle outside intensified, matching the storm now raging inside me. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the woman I loved, the woman I trusted implicitly, with the person who had orchestrated this financial deception, this colossal, life-altering secret. The numbers swam before my eyes, each digit a hammer blow to the foundation of our shared life, to our financial stability. I felt a wave of nausea, a dry, bitter taste filling my mouth, the air in the room suddenly too thin, too heavy. The silence now deafening, vibrating with the unspoken truth, the weight of the loan agreements, the sheer, crushing reality of it all, pressing down on me, threatening to suffocate me. The smell of fresh linen from the recently laundered clothes in the basket nearby seemed to mock the decay that had silently eaten away at our financial security. The pristine walls of our home now felt like the walls of a trap, a gilded cage, and I, the architect of our comfort, was trapped within it, blindsided, betrayed, and utterly, terrifyingly alone in this moment of devastating revelation. The chill of the morning air seeped not just through the windows, but deep into my bones, a cold that promised a long, brutal winter, a winter of financial insolvency and shattered dreams. My careful plans for retirement, our children's college savings, even the insurance policies I had prudently put in place, all felt jeopardized by this single, catastrophic act of financial mismanagement. The thought of our entire net worth being obliterated, replaced by an unbearable debt burden, was simply paralyzing. The immediate aftermath was a blur of raw emotion, a kaleidoscope of anger, despair, and a profound, aching sense of betrayal that festered in my chest like a physical wound. I remember the quiet, choked confession when she returned home, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed, the words spilling out in a torrent of shame and regret. It was a broken narrative of initial success, the intoxicating rush of quick gains from early investments in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, then the inevitable downturn, the desperate need to recoup losses, the fear of telling me, the spiraling lies, the silent suffering. All of it confirmed the terrible truth I held in my trembling hands. Her voice was barely a whisper, thin and reedy, a stark contrast to the once confident tone I had known and loved. My own voice, when it finally came, was a stranger's, hoarse with unshed tears, loaded with questions that had no easy answers. Questions about how she could do this, how she could keep such a monumental secret, how she could risk everything we had built, everything we hoped for, on such a precarious venture, jeopardizing our entire financial future. The air in our once vibrant home became thick with unspoken accusations, with the ghost of trust shattered. We moved through our days in a detached, almost dreamlike state, a heavy, suffocating silence punctuated by the occasional, strained conversation about the cold, hard numbers, the terrifying, unyielding figures that now dictated our every waking moment. The sheer scale of the debt loomed over us, a monstrous shadow consuming all light and hope. My long-term tech job, once a source of pride and financial stability, now felt like a fragile lifeline, constantly under threat. The corporate whispers of downsizing, restructuring, and a tightening market, which I had previously dismissed as background noise, suddenly became menacing prophecies, echoing the financial storm brewing in our personal lives. I worried about maintaining my income, about our ability to manage our burgeoning debt payments if my salary disappeared. And then, inevitably, cruelly, the axe fell. A terse email from HR, a polite but firm conversation with my boss, a man I had considered a mentor for over a decade. His voice was tinged with genuine regret as he explained the unavoidable changes, the strategic realignment, the standard corporate euphemisms for a mass layoff. My long tenure, my loyalty, my expertise, all evaporated in the face of market shifts and cost-cutting measures, rendering me, the reliable provider with a once secure income stream, suddenly unemployed, adrift. The comfortable cushion of my severance package, while substantial, felt like a temporary reprieve, a rapidly melting ice cube in a desert of financial ruin. The carefully constructed edifice of our lives began to crumble, brick by painful brick. The secure future we had envisioned, the children we had dreamed of raising in this spacious home, the comfortable retirement plan, all evaporated into thin air, leaving behind a stark, desolate landscape. The house-poor anxiety that had once been a mere whisper now screamed in my ears, a deafening roar. Our beautiful home, with its high ceilings and polished floors, transformed overnight from a sanctuary of success into a colossal burden, a constant, physical reminder of the debt that clung to us like a shroud. Each room, each expensive fixture, each window overlooking the distant city lights now felt like an accusation, a symbol of a dream turned nightmare. The quiet moments of my day were no longer filled with reflection or planning, but with annoying, relentless anxiety about our immediate budget and long-term financial solvency. The chill of morning air seeped not just through the windows, but deep into my bones, a persistent cold that no amount of coffee, no matter how strong or how hot, could ever truly warm. The taste of cheap instant coffee became a daily ritual, replacing the artisanal blends we once enjoyed, a small but potent symbol of our shrinking world and declining disposable income. The empty cups left on the kitchen counter, sometimes two, sometimes three, accumulating as the sleepless nights stretched into weeks, then months, a testament to the ceaseless churning of worry in my mind. The walls of our apartment, once a canvas for cherished memories, now felt like oppressive barriers, confining us within the suffocating grip of our predicament. The silence in the evenings, once a comforting companion, became a heavy, pregnant pause, filled with unspoken fears and the ghosts of our former selves. Our interactions were stiff, stilted, devoid of the natural rhythm and easy intimacy that had once defined our marriage, a strained politeness replacing the effortless flow of affection. The physical distance between us grew, despite sharing the same bed. The chasm of betrayal now felt wider than any ocean, threatening to swallow us whole. Divorce, once an unthinkable concept, a word whispered only in the context of other people's failures, now hung heavy in the air, an unspoken possibility, a chilling alternative to the slow, agonizing death of our marriage. It was a stark, terrifying consequence of a family financial crisis that had started with a secret, a gamble, and a lie, threatening to unravel everything we were, everything we had, and everything we had ever believed in, leaving us to navigate the wreckage in utter, heartbreaking silence. Our meticulously planned budget had crumbled, and with it, our dreams. The days that followed the layoff blurred into a monotonous cycle of applying for jobs, staring at screens, and the relentless, soul-crushing pursuit of any opportunity that might offer a glimmer of hope amidst the financial wreckage. The chill of early morning air became a familiar companion, seeping into the house through the old seals of the windows, a constant reminder of the energy bills we could no longer afford to ignore. The thermostat set stubbornly low, just enough to ward off the extreme cold, but never truly warm, a stark lesson in forced frugality. The silence in the house, once a luxury, now felt like a heavy blanket muffling conversation, amplifying the internal screams of worry and regret. My wife and I existed in parallel universes under the same roof, orbiting each other, occasionally colliding with strained politeness. The betrayal still a raw, open wound between us, casting a long shadow over every interaction. The coffee brewing in the morning, once a shared ritual, became a solitary act. The aroma, once comforting, now smelled faintly of desperation, clinging to the walls of the kitchen, mingling with the metallic tang of fear. The empty cups on the table, often accumulating, spoke volumes about our restless nights, the churning anxiety that prevented sleep. The supermarket trips, once a casual affair of choice and abundance, transformed into a grim exercise in frugality. The checkout aisle a gauntlet of calculated decisions, every item scrutinized for price per ounce, for necessity, for shelf life. The vibrant colors of fresh produce now seemed a luxury, replaced by the muted tones of staple goods, a silent, daily humiliation played out amidst the bright fluorescent lights and cheerful jingles. Our budget was absolute. The children, oblivious in their innocence, still asked for their favorite snacks, their requests piercing through the carefully constructed facade of normalcy we tried to maintain. Their bright, hopeful eyes were a constant, painful reminder of what we were risking, what we were losing, their future now uncertain, their needs adding another layer of quiet pressure to the already unbearable weight on my shoulders. The weight of being the sandwich generation now felt like an impossible burden. My aging parents needing more and more care, more and more financial assistance, their pensions barely covering their basic needs, their health issues escalating, their calls filled with worries about copays and prescriptions, their dependence a heavy, undeniable truth that I, even in my own crisis, could not shirk. The pressure of keeping their worries at bay, of providing a sense of security even when my own world was crumbling, was immense, an act I performed daily, donning a mask of calm and competence for their sake, while inside I felt like a hollowed-out shell. Divorce felt like an ever-present specter, a silent question hanging in the air during our stilted dinners, the unspoken possibility of escape from this shared nightmare. It was a tempting, terrifying thought that would flash across my mind in moments of profound exhaustion, a desperate impulse to sever the ties that bound me to this crushing reality, to this woman who, in her secret desperation, had unwittingly set fire to our life and our entire financial plan. The emotional toll of my layoff was immense, stripping away not just my income, but a part of my identity, the feeling of purpose, the quiet satisfaction of contributing, all gone, replaced by a hollow ache. Days spent in a cycle of job applications that often went unanswered, the generic rejection emails piling up in my inbox, each one a small, sharp stab. The world outside our house, once a vibrant tapestry of opportunities and investment potential, now felt indifferent, cold, unyielding. My wife, for her part, sank into a deep, quiet depression, her days marked by long stretches of silence, by the pervasive smell of stale coffee, by the sight of her staring blankly at the walls of our beautiful, burdensome home. The shame and guilt etched into her features, a constant, unspoken apology in her downcast eyes. Her occasional attempts to connect, a tentative touch on my arm, a murmured "I'm sorry," were met with a stiff withdrawal. My hurt was too profound, my anger too deeply rooted to allow for immediate solace. The idea of forgiveness seemed like a distant, impossible peak to climb, shrouded in a mist of pain and resentment. Each day was a slow, agonizing grind marked by the ever-present fear of bankruptcy, the chilling thought of losing everything, of having to explain to our children, to my parents, that we had failed. A failure made all the more bitter by the memory of the wealth, the success, the seemingly invincible stability we once possessed, now just a faded photograph, a cruel reminder of a life that felt a million miles away, a ghost of a future net worth that would never be. The turning point was not a grand gesture, no sudden epiphany bathed in cinematic light, but rather a slow, arduous crawl back from the brink, a series of small, almost imperceptible shifts that began to subtly realign our fractured world. It started with the realization, stark and unavoidable, that giving up, walking away, pursuing the path of divorce would only compound the devastation. That the financial abyss we faced would only deepen, becoming an insurmountable chasm with two separate households to support, two sets of legal fees, two lives to rebuild from nothing, further eroding any remaining assets. The practicalities, cold and unforgiving, forced a painful reevaluation of our options, a quiet understanding that our survival, both financial and emotional, was inextricably linked, regardless of the betrayal, regardless of the pain. We had to engage in radical risk management to mitigate further damage. It was in a moment of quiet exhaustion, late one night, the house silent save for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the gentle whir of the old ceiling fan, that I found myself staring at the wall, at a framed photograph of us from years ago, laughing, vibrant, our arms around each other. It was a tangible representation of a shared history, of a love that had once felt so solid, so unshakable. And in that moment, a flicker of something, not forgiveness yet, but a yearning for connection, a desperate hunger for the shared purpose that had once defined us, broke through the frozen shell of my anger. I realized that while she had betrayed my trust, she had also been suffering alone for a long time, carrying the crushing weight of her secret, her shame, her despair. I remembered the faint shadows under her eyes, the quiet withdrawals, the subtle tremor in her hand, the signs I had dismissed, misunderstood. A new wave of emotion, a complicated mix of lingering hurt and burgeoning empathy, washed over me, a fragile bridge beginning to form across the chasm. The next morning, over the now ritualistic instant coffee, I spoke, my voice still rough, but softer than it had been in months. "We need to talk," I said, the words simple, yet weighted with the gravity of our situation. Really talk, not about blame, but about how we fix this together, how we tackle this debt. Her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen from another sleepless night, met mine, and I saw not just guilt, but a flicker of fragile hope, a desperate willingness to grasp onto any lifeline. And that was the beginning, a difficult, painful conversation that stretched for hours, punctuated by tears, by raw honesty, by the slow, agonizing peeling back of layers of secrecy and shame. She confessed every detail, every misguided decision, every moment of panic. The initial allure of quick riches in the crypto market, the desperate attempts to make up for early losses, the deepening hole, the student loan consolidation used as collateral, the fear, the isolation, all of it poured out, raw and unfiltered. And I, for the first time, listened without immediately judging, listened to the human story behind the devastating numbers, understood, dimly, the complex interplay of hope, greed, fear, and self-deception that had led her down this treacherous path of speculative investments. It was far from easy, the resentment still a hot coal in my stomach, but something shifted, a tiny crack in the wall of ice that had formed around my heart. The first step towards rebuilding was brutally practical. We laid out every single debt, every single bill, every single financial obligation spread across the dining room table, a terrifying mosaic of our financial ruin. The cold, hard facts staring back at us, the numbers almost incomprehensible in their magnitude. But facing them together, for the first time, felt like a small, defiant act of solidarity, a shared burden, rather than an isolated one. We began to formulate a plan, a desperate, painstaking strategy to extricate ourselves from the suffocating grip of this colossal debt. We explored every option: debt consolidation, refinancing existing loans, selling off every non-essential asset, the expensive second car, the luxury watches, the art. We even contemplated the unthinkable, selling the very home that had been the symbol of our success. The thought of leaving it, of giving up the view of the city lights, the scent of fresh drywall that still lingered in some corners, was a bitter pill to swallow, but the alternative was far worse. We cut every possible expense, canceled subscriptions, cooked every meal at home, mostly simple, inexpensive fare. The supermarket menu was now dictated by necessity, not desire. Our strict budgeting became an almost spiritual practice. The children, bless their innocent hearts, noticed the changes, the fewer treats, the older clothes, but they adapted with a resilience that shamed our adult struggles. And my parents, still unaware of the full scale of our catastrophe, received our support in quieter ways, carefully managed, their needs prioritized even as our own resources dwindled to almost nothing. We spent hours on the phone with financial advisors, with lenders, with lawyers, navigating the bewildering labyrinth of bankruptcy laws and debt restructuring. Each call was a small, incremental step forward, each small victory, a slightly lower interest rate, a deferred payment, celebrated with a quiet, exhausted relief. The path to forgiveness was not a straight line, but a winding, rocky trail marked by setbacks, by moments of renewed anger and despair, by the ghost of betrayal that still occasionally flickered between us. But also by small, tender moments of support, a hand gently placed on my arm as I stared despondently at job rejection emails, a quiet offer to cook dinner after a particularly draining day of phone calls, a shared sigh of relief when a small, new contract, a freelance tech gig, came through, offering a much-needed new income stream. Her unwavering commitment to the arduous task of rebuilding, her tireless efforts to find odd jobs, to sell her own cherished possessions, slowly, painstakingly began to chip away at the walls I had erected around my heart. The quiet determination in her eyes, the genuine remorse in her every action, slowly started to mend the broken trust, not fully, not completely, but enough to see a future. A future built on something far more robust than fleeting wealth or stock market fluctuations. A future built on shared struggle, on hard-won honesty, and on the quiet, profound strength of a love that, against all odds, was learning to survive, to forgive, and to rebuild one painstaking, vulnerable step at a time. This rigorous budgeting and meticulous financial planning became our new normal. The process of disentanglement from the financial ruin was a long, brutal marathon, stretching over years, not months, a daily exercise in resilience, a constant dance with numbers and deadlines. The initial shock had long faded, replaced by a quiet, determined resolve. The house, our once grand symbol of aspiration, eventually had to be sold, a painful but necessary decision to alleviate the colossal mortgage debt. The closing was a somber affair, the empty rooms echoing with the ghosts of dreams unfulfilled, the scent of fresh paint long gone, replaced by the faint, lingering smell of dust and unspoken goodbyes. We moved into a much smaller, older rental, a modest apartment on the other side of town, its walls thinner, its plumbing noisier, its view a brick wall instead of city lights. But in its humble confines, a different kind of life began to take root, a life stripped bare of the ostentation, rich in a new kind of quiet contentment. I eventually found another tech job, not as prestigious, not as high-paying as my old one, but stable, fulfilling in its own way, a different company, a new team, a fresh start. And my wife, her spirit slowly re-emerging from the shadow of guilt, took on several part-time positions, anything to contribute to our income, meticulously tracking every dollar, every penny. The old recklessness replaced by an almost obsessive caution, a testament to her deep regret and her unwavering commitment to our shared financial recovery. We set up a joint account, all income flowing into it, all expenses meticulously discussed and agreed upon. The era of secrets was replaced by an era of radical transparency, a new foundation of trust built not on blind faith, but on deliberate, consistent action and open financial management. The wounds of betrayal, though no longer raw, remained, like faint scars on the landscape of our marriage, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of deceit. But they were scars, not open wounds, healed tissue, stronger in some ways for having endured the trauma. The initial years were marked by a pervasive, low-level anxiety, a constant vigilance against any hint of financial strain. Every supermarket menu was scrutinized, every bill paid immediately. The chill of morning air often matched the lingering fear in my stomach, but slowly, imperceptibly, that anxiety began to recede, replaced by a profound appreciation for what we did have, for the simple fact of our survival. The quiet moments in the evening, once filled with tension, now held a different kind of warmth, the shared silence of reading side by side, the comfortable weight of her head on my shoulder, the faint, comforting smell of her hair. These moments became the new currency of our wealth, more precious than any stock portfolio or cryptocurrency gains could ever be. The children, resilient and adaptable, thrived in their new, simpler environment, their laughter echoing through the smaller rooms, filling them with a joy that had been missing for too long. They never knew the full extent of our struggles, only that we were a family together, navigating life's challenges, their needs always met, even if it meant fewer extravagant toys or more homemade dinners. And my aging parents, their health now more fragile than ever, continued to receive our unwavering support, a burden that now felt less like a weight and more like an integral part of our shared humanity. Their quiet gratitude, their loving smiles, a source of deep comfort and purpose. We learned to find joy in the small things, the perfectly brewed cup of coffee on a Saturday morning, the warmth of the sun through the window, the soft texture of a well-worn blanket, the simple comfort of a home, however modest, filled with love and honesty. The empty cups on the table now represented not restless nights, but shared mornings, quiet conversations, the slow, steady rhythm of a life rebuilt on solid financial footing. We still carried the weight of the past, the memories of loss, the ghost of what might have been, but it was no longer a crushing burden. Instead, it was a profound teacher, a constant reminder of the values that truly mattered: integrity, transparency, forgiveness, and the enduring power of a love that had been tested in the crucible of despair and emerged, not unscathed, but undeniably stronger. We had lost a fortune, an entire net worth built over years, but we had gained something infinitely more valuable: a marriage rebuilt on the solid bedrock of painful truth, shared vulnerability, and a hard-won, quiet contentment with what we had, not what we once dreamed of having. The chill of the morning air still sometimes brings a pang of memory, but it is quickly warmed by the quiet gratitude for the simple fact of waking up beside her, of facing another day, together, unbroken, resilient, and deeply, truly content. Thanks listening this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's see how global our community is. Comment your country down below. Share this story to your friends and leave a like and subscribe for more episodes like this.